Hey everyone, it's 10 Types, and today I'm going to be going over the top 10 cards from Prismatic Evolutions. Being completely honest, the set is, to me, kind of terrible because it is mostly reprints, which is nice for some people, and also is more focused on alternate arts and also some evolutions, which are not great to say the least, but we might see some on this list, and they're okay. I mean, we'll talk about them a little bit, but ultimately, a lot of them are pretty bad. The Sylveon EX isn't even new, and then the baby evolutions aren't new, except for I think the Sylveon might be new. It is kind of weird. But regardless, the evolutions are a big focus in this set, and there's a bunch of really bad EXs. And there was also Blaziken EX, which is okay, but that's I'm pretty sure confirmed to be not in this set. The one card I'm not sure of if it's in the set or not is Tapu Koko EX, which is an okay card. It has free retreat. It's a decent 2 energy attacker for Miraidon after Raikou V rotates. Raikou V is very good because it can use Force Seal Stone. That's very important to that card, and so obviously Tapu Koko EX can't use that. But post rotation, this could be put into Miraidon EX, and I'm sure it'll be out by then. I actually don't know. Pokemon sometimes just pushes cards back really far, but regardless, I looked at two sources. The one said that this card is in the set, and the one said that it wasn't, and both were very recent, so I'm not 100% sure whether it's in the set or not, but regardless, it is a card to keep an eye out for that could be good within Miraidon post rotation. So at this point, there's not really a reason to play it, but it's okay. Then number 10 here, we have a card that's a bit of a niche tech option, to be honest, but it is a card that is a card that might see play. Leafeon EX is a card that is obviously an EX and it's an evolution, and that's cool because the evolutions are a big part of this set and are, as I said, they're okay. This is not the best one, but it's good against Charizard EX to counter there, and similar cards to that. I guess like Hydreigon EX, that doesn't see that much play. This isn't even a perfect counter because your opponent might not have 3 energies in play. But regardless, Leafeon EX is definitely an okay card that I've looked through some evolution box decks. They're not the best, but they're okay, and Leafeon could be played in them, and so I figured it deserved a spot on this list. Then we got Hobin Barry here. This is a tool card. This is another pretty niche card, but not bad, especially before rotation. Also, these are proxies. This one's from Justin Basil. Some are from Pokemon proxies. And I don't think there are any of the official English cards that I have in this video. But regardless, Hobin Barry here, on the official English scans, I should say. But Hobin Barry here says if the Pokemon this card is attached to is damaged by an attack from your opponent's Dragon Pokemon, it takes 60 less damage after weakness resistance, which I don't know if that can matter. Yeah, I don't know if that can come up. I might be able to come up with a Porygon, but regardless, it's 60 less, and then you discard it. So one-time use card. This says you take 60 less from Dragon Pokemon, and that's okay. I mean, Dragon is the best type in the game right now with Regidrago V-Star, Dragapult EX, which is played a decent amount outside of Regidrago V-Star, and then also within it's the main attacker of Raging Bolt EX decks, where you also have Teal Sargopon EX. So Raging Bolt EX, this essentially removes 1 energy off. They need to discard an extra one, so that could be meaningful. And it also means that Regidrago will have a more difficult time one-shotting you, depending exactly what it's trying to do and what you're playing. If you're playing let's say Raging Bull Ogerpon, then they're probably going to attack with the Executor or with the only Executor EX, which just instantly knocks you out. But if they are attacking with Dragapult EX, this could be meaningful to me to say that you're taking that 60 less to the active, or maybe not. It depends on the math, but this is a card that is interesting. Ultimately, after rotation, I don't think Dragon's going to be the best type. I mean, it could be, but you are losing Regidrago V-Star, which is the best, probably the best deck right now, and it's the best Dragon deck. Some people might argue another deck. It's not like the clear cut, like it's not like a broken S tier deck. If you say like S tier is just the highest tier, then I guess it's S tier. But it's not like a deck that's just well above the rest of the competition or anything like that. But it is a very, very highly played and very good deck right now. And with that rotating, this card will lose value in terms of like being useful in different matchups. And ultimately, it's a card that's not going to be useful in a lot of your matchups still. But it is a card you could play if you really want to be able to beat Regidrago, Dragapult, or Raging Bolt easier. And playing multiple copies means that presumably that matchup becomes noticeably better. Though it does depend on what exactly you're playing, but definitely a card that, and we've seen a berry of, I think, every type. I don't think we saw the colorless, but I believe this is the last one. Honestly, I haven't been paying attention because they're not good, but this is the best one. The darkness one is kind of playable as well. Darkness is another pretty good, pretty played type, but the meta is pretty diverse, which is nice, but ultimately means cards like this are worse, but not a terrible card. Then we have Amris. This is a supporter. It's, it's not great, but it's interesting. I think it's underrated. I think it's highly underrated. You draw 4 at the end of your turn. If you have 5 or more cards in your hand, discard your hand. Keep in mind, this will be after you take prize cards, so that's kind of awkward. This is useful for, I don't know exactly what it's useful for, but it's useful if you want to just draw 4. And the downside is, I mean, obviously, if you end up discarding your hand, that's really bad. You probably will lose, to be honest. Then that's probably what'll happen. But you can almost always get your hand below this threshold, even after accounting for taking prize cards. But there's something to keep in mind that it might not be, good enough. It might end up losing 2 games if you're not careful. Normally, decks that want draw 4 would be something like control, or draw 3, I guess, would be something like control, or decks that acquire big hands. Obviously, that's not where you want to play this. But draw 3 is, it's okay. People play it sometimes. People don't play just pure draw 3, but, well, Avery is a supporter that saw a bunch of play. It was a while ago. It was like a year ago, but a lot of people played it, and it just drew you 3 cards most of the time. And occasionally it'd be better than draw 3, and occasionally it'd be worse than draw 3. And I was never a fan of that card, but some people played it a lot, and it was pretty much just draw 3 a lot of the time. And there are other cards like Worker, often just draw 3, and things like that, and they got value. And so drawing 4 is obviously better than that. And the downside, I mean, I think it could have just been draw 4 and it would have been a balanced card. But regardless, Amris is definitely a supporter that might be something that some people are interested in. Obviously, these cards aren't great, if you can't tell by now. That they're not the best, but they're interesting. Then we got Max Rod here. This is a trainer card in item, and it's an A spec. And it says, obviously, you can only play 1 A spec in total in your deck, and Prime Catcher is really good. And there are other ones that are also very strong, but Max Rod is really strong too. It doesn't see much play in Japan. These cards are all out in Japan, but it is at least like decent competitive success. But Max Rod is a pretty interesting A spec here because it says you choose up to any 5 in any combination of Pokemon and basic energy from your discard and put them into your hand. So if you're playing something like, I guess I'll just say Raging Bolt Ogerpon, you can recover, or that's not a great example, but you could recover a bunch of energies, start discarding some, accelerating some, and then get back your Raging Bolt EX as well. Maybe a TMS Ogerpon EX if you have one of those in the discard, things like that, and you can just burst a bunch of things onto the board. Obviously, Prime Catcher is really good there too. And honestly, it's kind of the decks that would be played in. It is competing with Prime Catcher, but it is really strong, just an insane amount of recovery. And so it could be really, really good. And the returns would be insane. I saw it, I believe one of the decks that was played in was like a Dustmore deck, and it could get back a bunch of Dustmore pieces. Ultimately, you're not gonna, this would be 5 like Dustmore pieces, and you need, assuming you're using rare candy, then that would be 2.5 Dustmores. You really don't want to be like Dustmoring 3-4 times in the game. You'll probably, lose by knocking yourself out and then giving up a bunch of prizes, but still, Max Rod is interesting and can be useful for lots of different scenarios, specifically late game. So this is why, people like to use cards early game. For example, Forest Sealstone, used early game. But Max Rod, I 100% believe, is a card that is good. I think it's good, and I don't know exactly what its place is in the game, but it's one of those cards that I expect to be pretty good at some point. And comparing it to other ace specs like Energy Search Pro, Mixed Blender, or whatever that one's called, Brilliant Blender, I think is the name. And I'm sure there are others that fall under a similar category of being good in specific decks. I think Max Rod is better than those. I think it's theoretically a card that could go in a lot of different decks and get some form of value, and in some decks might get insane value, but we have to wait and see. Right now it's not awesome, but I think it'll reach a point where it is really, really good. Then we have 3 cards that go together. They're Eevee EX, Flareon EX, and Jolteon EX. These are the best, well, Eevee EX isn't an evolution, but they're the best evolution cards from that, type of deck. Keep in mind that Eevee, the regular Eevee, is actually quite good of allowing you to evolve instantly if you're in the active, like from your hand. So that's good, but that's not a new card in this set, so that's not eligible. But Eevee EX is a card that is a basic EX, but can evolve through its ability Rainbow DNA, allowing it to evolve to any Pokemon that's EX that evolves from Eevee. It does not evolve into the single price evolutions, some of which are pretty good. I haven't really looked too much into them. I know some of them. I know the Flareon, Vaporeon, and Jolteon, the baby version of those, and the baby Sylveon, the new one. But there's a lot of them, and they're not great. I remember I have looked through them, and they weren't very good. But they are interesting cards that you cannot evolve from this Eevee EX. However, you can evolve Eevee EX into your EXs. So obviously aimed at this Eevee EX box and Quartz Shine here for fire, water, lightning. It does 200, the same attack costs as Flareon EX and Jolteon EX. And honestly, these are like the next three cards. And I guess I'd put them in this order, but you could really mix and match. I feel like the order I think the order for the top three is like very defined, and outside of that, it's not. But anyways, Eevee EX here can attack for 200, and you can use the item card Glass Trumpet. I went over the evolution box deck and use like Glass Trumpet, and then you evolve. It's really weird, but anyways, you can attack with this turn going second if you wanted to, and it's not super easy, especially with the rotation of Radiant Greninja coming pretty soon after these cards come out. However, it is a card that it's a usable attack, and its ability is nice, giving you extra access to your Eevees. And while Eevee does have a good ability, it only has the baby one, the non-EX version. If someone uses the term, or if I use the term baby, at least it's generally a non EX or non-multi-prize version of a card, which is a term that is used some, though there are separate baby Pokemon. But anyways, the baby Eevee is a card that only has 50 HP, which is not great. I was talking about Dragapult. Dragapult is good. It's going to stay good, and that's bad for that Eevee. So you can play this Eevee EX instead, and you don't have the ability of the other Eevee, which is not ideal. But in those situations, you could evolve immediately anyways and not have the downside of the lower HP, except if you got devolved. But then this Eevee, well, theoretically, you could get ability lock. There's a lot of weird stuff here, but that's cool. And then ultimately, probably the best thing about this card, to be honest, is that it's a Terra basic Pokemon. In Terra basic Pokemon, there's a handful of them, and none of them are really that good. Trapgos EX is very good, and it's somewhat like universal, but it's not a great attacker in every deck. You need the Stadium, and you really need double Turbo Energy or some form of Energy Acceleration to actually attack with it. So well, it could really attack in any deck. It's not particularly good in any deck, but it is thrown into random decks. And then there are the Ogerpons, specifically Cornerstone Master Ogerpon EX or Wellspring Master Ogerpon EX, the fighting and water ones respectively. And they are both somewhat techable, but again, they have problems. Wellspring Master Ogerpon EX wants water energy for its second attack, which is nice. Its first attack is okay. Kind of wants double turbo energy for that to win games, but can be useful in certain scenarios. And then you have the Cornerstone Master Ogerpon EX, which wants fighting energy to actually attack, but its ability gives it immunity to Pokemon with abilities. But Eevee EX here is certainly the one you want to go to if you are playing any evolution, so you can actually evolve into them, and that's really nice. It also only has one retreat, which Trapgos EX has two, and then it also has the threat of evolving, which even if you're not playing an evolution, then your opponent might be scared of it. And it's an interesting card here. It's a bit of a weird card, but it is a nice card and important to the evolution deck because you're probably playing the Noctowl engine, and you can play it much easier with this Eevee EX. You could play you need Glass Trumpet to accelerate to your baby Eevees, and so you can have Eevee EX in play, or you could have the Terra in play, evolving turn one. As I said, it's kind of weird. There's actually another Eevee, which is from, I believe, Astral Radiance, which will be rotating with rotation, but before rotation, you can use it. You can evolve it using the other Eevee, and then you search your deck. This allows you to, because Glass Trumpet's only to the bench, and then the evolution can only evolve in the active. This allows you to use Electric Generator and Magma Basin. It's a big thing, but regardless, Eevee EX is a part of that weirdness, and so Eevee EX is definitely a card that will add more consistency to the deck, or maybe and more complexity, which might be weird and unfortunate in certain circumstances, but is a good card. Then we have Flareon EX. This is probably the main one that's seeing play and Flareon EX, Jolteon EX, and also Vaporeon EX, which is not on this list. It's not very good, I don't think, but they all the second attack here with different names, and they all do 280 for Fire, Water, Lightning, and cannot attack next turn. Eevee EX has the similar attack, does less damage, but ultimately is on a basic, and so you can attack with these attacks, and that is nice. Those are the types of energy you'll be putting into your deck. You can add more maybe for Leafeon EX or whatever, but ultimately these three are the main ones. And then you have Burning Charge here on Flareon EX, 130 for Fire Colorless, and then you search for 2 basic energy and attach them to one of your Pokemon. You search your deck for 2 basic energies, and that is, I mean, it's an okay attack. It's not amazing, but it's decent for setting up another Pokemon, especially if you have all these weird energy types. Powering it up turn 1's kind of hard. As I said, you need Magma Basin, or you could use Glass Trumpet. You probably would use Glass Trumpet. Magma Basin is really weird, where you need to use the Eevee combos, using like both of the different Eevees, and as I said, it gets weird. But regardless, you have Flareon EX. Then Jolteon EX, which also has free retreat. Yes, it has the lowest HP of 260 of any of the Evolution EXs, but that doesn't really matter. It's not that much weaker than the others, so it could, but I don't expect it to matter much. And these are also all Terras, which it doesn't really matter, but it's a thing. This enables the Noctowl engine, but as I said, the Eevee EX is the one that's going to allow you to use it consistently and on earlier turns. Then potentially, if you didn't have a basic that can activate its ability, obviously Noctowl is going to be used on like the second turn or later, but if you might need Noctowl to search out your evolutions, which you can't do if they're not in play. Regardless, Jolteon EX is cool, having free retreat and having all the evolution stuff. You have Flashing Spear, which does for 2, does 60, but you can discard up to 2 basic energy from your bench Pokemon. It does 9 more for each card discarded in this way. That can allow you to hit for a pretty solid 240 there. And yeah, I mean that's good. It's not insane, but I mean it's twice as much as Flareon EX and so that's pretty good. Jolteon EX is definitely a solid attacker. Getting the energy on the benched Eevee or benched Pokemon would be probably through using Glass Trumpet to an Eevee or 2 Eevees. And yeah, I mean, it's a very solid attacker. I think it's not broken, but I think it's decent. Having free retreat's nice. Not too much to say about this card other than it's a pretty solid card. Not great. I don't necessarily see this card as being a card that sees competitive level play. Same thing with like really any of these cards, though they could. I wouldn't be shocked if they did, and I wouldn't be shocked if they didn't. But coming into the top 3, these are definitely the best cards in this set. They're kind of boring, to be honest, but they are very good. And the first one is Black Belt's Practice. Black Belt's Practice is a supporter. There's like a bunch of copies, different arts of it from each of the generations. I don't remember if they're all in the set, but regardless. Some of them are, and it says, during this turn, attacks used by your Pokemon do 40 more damage to your opponent's active Pokemon EX. 40 extra damage on a supporter is nice. It's not super easy to do all the time, especially with the rotation of Lumineon V, but it is pretty decent. The one thing that I think holds this card back actually for me is Kieran, which is a supporter, which is good. I don't play it that much, but I know some people like it a lot. I think, like, theoretically it seems cool, and you do 30 extra damage, doing 10 to EXs or Vs. Ultimately, obviously, Vs will be in the game a little bit, and then they'll rotate while this is in the format. So the V part, missing that doesn't matter too much, but Kieran is only 10 less damage, and I think that Kieran's, like, having the switch effect on a supporter is ultimately, like, right now it's really meaningful because there is a decent chunk of control. It's quite good. And then those control decks also have have access to. I was just thinking about, like, well, we'll get to something, but they're probably not item locking you, but they could end up milling the items through Misfortune Sisters, which will be rotating, as well as Airy. Airy's like more. I don't know. There's stuff to talk about that I've talked about before. It gets kind of weird and complicated, but regardless, Misfortune Sisters, Air, you can kind of look at them as the same card for this argument, where they're milling your switch cards, right? Your Prime Catcher, your Switch, your those two, right? But they're not. And then also, if you have Energy Recovery cards, they're milling those. They're milling stuff that is things that you need, right? And then they won't mill Kieran because it's a supporter. And so it's pretty good. It's definitely a card that is, a solid supporter that's seen play. And Black Belt's Practice will be competing with it. I do believe that the 10 more damage will be useful in some scenarios, but I don't think it'll be super massive either. But we'll see what damage breakpoints look like after rotation in like a little while from now. Because right now there aren't too many damage numbers that you're really looking to hit all the time that you're consistently looking to hit. Yeah, and generally more damage is better, but there have been previous formats where certain numbers, jumping up 10 damage could mean so much of a difference, or no difference at all. So we'll see what happens with Black Belt's practice, but it is a decent supporter card. Then we have Regigigas. Regigigas is a card that I think is very good. It's seen play right now. It's seen play in Lugia in Japan. I think it's seen play on some other things. Um, I've seen play in Lugia, a bit of Lost Zone, um, Go Back's Caliber, apparently, and every time I do videos like this, I look through decks and I see weird stuff. Lost Zone though, mostly Lugia, Back's Caliber decks in general, and decks with just general energy acceleration because its attack cost is 4 colorless, but it is a basic Pokemon and it does 100, but if your opponent's active is a Terra, it does 230 more, which is essentially one-shotting every Pokemon in the game if they're a Terra, so that's really good. Yeah, I don't know what it misses, to be honest. I guess it doesn't one-shot Pikachu EX, but that's a different thing. Regardless, Regigigas is definitely a really strong Pokemon. It's expensive, and its retreat cost is really high, but it also does okay damage to not Terras. It's not great, certainly not something you want to be attacking with. Say if your opponent's sniping around you every turn with something, I can't think of anything because people don't really do that, but or if they're spreading damage with, say, Uxie, but then you're still knocking him out every turn, so that's decent. So Regigigas is ultimately an okay card if it's stuck in the active. Not great, but it's not the end of the world. You could lose the game, but probably not. If you get stuck and you can't power it up, that's bad though. But Regigigas is a decent card. I think it's a very strong single prize tech attacker that could be played in lots of different decks. Obviously, you don't really want to be putting it into like Regigigas EX. You'll never power it up, and then something like Charizard EX that's very hard and very taxing on your resources. But ultimately, this is a card that I expect to see play in different decks. Ultimately, I don't think Terras are going to be a big focus this coming year. I don't know if we've actually seen any revealed yet. Obviously, we've seen like the evolutions, but talking about the expansion with rotation, Journey Together or Battle Partners, I forget which is the international and which is the Japanese set. But with that set, I don't think, and going forward for the rest of this year, I don't think Terras are going to be as emphasized in printing, but I think there will still be meaningful within the metagame with Dragon Ball EX and Charizard EX and like the Ogerpon EXs, things like that. So Regigigas is good against the metagame. Not everything. It's not like a main attacker that you'll be building around, but it's decent. The last card it's the Badu. This Badu is... So this card, I don't remember how long this has been out versus the Badu, but regardless, this has been out for a little while and has been played in around, like, I'll say 400 decks, less than that, somewhere between 300 and 400 decks. Badu has been played in more decks than that in Japan. These are decks that are top 60 finishes in 64-person tournaments in Japan, and it's been played in like a lot between 1600 and 1700 decks, and that's a lot, right? So this has been played a lot, and Badu is very, very strong. Potentially, it's a one of in really almost all of these decks, but is a card that says you get to item lock your opponent's active, or item lock your opponent, you do 10 to their active, it's free, and it has free retreat, and only has 30 HP. It's a card that's gotten a lot of talk. It's ultimately a card that's a really great one of tech into any deck because it has free retreat and a free attack, so you could play it in any deck. Its low HP is sometimes a pretty serious problem. It's not in my opinion, not a broken card. I think it's good and will be a highly played card when it comes out, but I think it's overplayed in Japan because it's a new card, and really the only great cards from this set. It is truly a great card, but it's not... it's just so much better than all the other cards. So if you want to play something good from the new set, you play Badu. Yes, Regigigas is good, and yes, Black Belt Training is also good, and yes, there are some other decent cards, but Badu's way above all those because they're quite bad. But Badu is a very good card. Item locking your opponent for free on a basic is very good. It's obviously very good, and it's annoying. It's not something you'll be doing the whole game, but it's something you can do during the early turns in any deck. Set up behind it and just win the game because your opponent can't play items. And you probably can, because it's unlikely they'll be setting up super well or really much at all behind Badu. They'll get something going, especially once you drop the item lock. But if they only get one basic into play that is of their attacker, like the previous evolution to their attacker, you Badu item lock them, and then you knock out their only Charmander before they get a second one down, then you probably win the game, to be honest, or at least you're at a massive advantage of like a 2-turn advantage tempo wise, which is really big. So Badu's definitely a card that is good. It's not like a super broken card, but it is good, and it's going to be very good. I think it's going to be a card that'll immediately have a substantial impact on the metagame, then subdue a little bit, and then we'll see. We'll see where it ends up after that. But regardless, Badu is a very good card, and 100% a card you should be aware of. I think a lot of people watching this, especially at this point at the end of the video, are very aware of this card, but definitely one you need to make sure you know and understand that it could happen at any time. Don't play yourself into a situation where you run out, you will lose if you can't play an item card. By like getting yourself stuck or running out of energy or something. Just be aware of that. Play your super rods earlier, play your night stretches earlier, things like that. But anyways, I hope you enjoyed the video. Tell me down below in the comment section what you think about the set, but also consider liking the video, and also subscribe, all that good stuff if you enjoyed, and I'm excited to see you in the next video.